Hey folks, I'm Josh Sucher. I'm dialing in from Brooklyn, New York. Very, very sad that I can't be there with you today, but I'm very excited to get a chance to speak to you anyway this way. I'm here to talk to you about some of my retro tech projects, but really more to talk about some of the wonderful people who have made them possible. So, about 2 years ago, I was digging around for something unrelated in my parents' basement, and I came across a few old, dirty mechanical keyboards, these Apple extended keyboards that we used to use with our old Macs. And they were filthy, as you can see, and just begging to be cleaned up and rescued. So I brought them home, cleaned them up, got them working pretty quickly, but I noticed that, some of the keys were sticking or didn't work at all. Um, and I thought it was kind of in my wheelhouse to try to fix it. So basically, I popped over onto eBay and, you know, I've just bought a few random switches from the first seller I found at the right price after, doing a little bit of research to figure out kind of what key switch I needed for this particular keyboard. And a few weeks later, this big package arrived from New Mexico. Strange. So inside, as I opened it up, I found an unlikely array of riches. The package was just stuffed with articles, pamphlets, photos, burned DVDs and CDs. And of course, the 10 Alps switches I'd ordered for my keyboard. But then also a handwritten invitation to some event called Kansas Fest, signed by my eBay seller, Stephen Buggy. And as it turns out, Dr. Buggy is a huge Apple II enthusiast. Apparently, he still uses his Apple II as his daily driver. Claims to love its portability, which allows him to take it on vacation. As you can see, he's also a geologist. He's a tenured professor at the University of New Mexico, a tenured psychology professor. He's a hot air ballooning enthusiast, a uranium prospector. I could go on, but certainly he's a pretty strong candidate for the most interesting person on the planet. And I know what it's like to have a lot of special interests. I've spent my life as a magpie and a dilettante. I make a lot of retro computing projects. I train chatbots in my own voice. I make miniatures or bijou memory cocoons, as one of them's been called. I've studied anthropology, intellectual property law, interaction design. I've been called as useless as an orchid in a snowstorm. So I know what it's like to have a lot of interests, but what really struck me about Dr. Buggy, wasn't the wide array of interests. It was more, the 40-year journey at the heart of it. Apparently, Dr. Buggy has used Apple IIs, started using them in his classroom in the 80s, started attending Kansas Fest as way back as 1996. Kansas Fest, by the way, it turns out, is an Apple II gathering that happens every year in the great state of Kansas. And has been happening for decades. And one would think that maybe after 40 years they would have said the last word about the Apple II, but apparently not. Apparently there's more to say. So thanks to Dr. Buggy, my keyboard worked just fine. With its newly restored, calibrated, professionally lubricated Alps key switches, carefully soldered into place. And then, I was off to my next project. So mechanical keyboards were kind of on my mind, and my dad was closing up his law office, so I had my eye on his old IBM Wheelwriter, which I'd loved playing around with and making my own little business cards on as a kid. So I got to inherit this, which was really cool, and I kind of knew I wanted to bring it back to life. So I did some research on it, and I discovered that it had this optional expansion interface, so PCs of that era could print to it, basically. My dad's Wheelwriter didn't have that interface installed, but it turns out the underlying logic board is the same, and over the past decade or so, many folks online have spent a lot of energy reverse engineering the format and have made their work publicly available, both the software and the hardware schematics. So, perhaps the most technically impressive recent example is something known as the Cadet Writer, which is part of this volunteer project based out of the Computer History Museum. The way this works is it's this custom PCB that inserts itself between the typewriter's keyboard and the logic board, so that it can detect keystrokes, and and route them outward, and also pass in keystrokes from other machines, so that you can basically kind of use it as a terminal, which is pretty cool. And this is part of a bigger project called the IBM 1620 Junior project. So they've been there, restoring this huge machine and kind of repurposing the Wheelwriter, this vintage typewriter, as as a communications mechanism. But it's a super cool project worth looking up, and it was my first opportunity to order a PCB and begin attempting to assemble it a couple of years ago. So with that and a few other resources that I found, I built a project that I called Mr. McGillicuddy, which is a personal assistant living inside my dad's old Wheelwriter. Basically, it just ingests my calendar and email and outputs a daily agenda all by itself. And you can see it in action here. It's pretty fun. It's kind of got this like ghost in the machine thing going on as it operates. It just sort of has this like cron job, every morning, kind of gives me the rundown and the summary, which is pretty cool. Yeah, but it was a fun project to get going. I posted about it on LinkedIn, and a former coworker, a friend of mine, got excited and basically sent me a DM, commissioned me right away to do a variant based on Underwood typewriters as a gift for his boss, whose grandfather had worked for Underwood. So I did a ton of research on Underwood. My Wheelwriter was an electronic typewriter. It had a logic board, so it was pretty easy to interface with. Underwood, on the other hand, the brand didn't quite make it into the digital era. Underwood was purchased by Olivetti in the 1960s, and the brand slowly died out afterwards. So, it was a big player in the first half of the 20th century, but kind of not in any time that would have been more useful for my project. Eventually, I found exactly one Underwood branded typewriter that Olivetti made from the early digital age. Magically, I found one on eBay and was able to snap it up. But figuring out how to interface with this was another problem altogether. So, and it turns out, by the way, Facebook Marketplace sellers like this one were not very helpful. This was a guy who was selling a similar model that had its own kind of expansion interface, serial port. It had the original manual. So I sent him a message, and I was like, please, just let me buy the manual off of you, or can you just like look at page 10 and and snap a photo for me? But it's very hard to explain to people when you're kind of doing projects like this, like what they're all about. But it was a bit of a blessing in disguise, because after a ton more research and more dead ends, I came across the Association for the Preservation of Classic Computers, which I'm not going to try to pronounce in German. But in particular, this one forum member, Ina St. Ina, who, as of today, has 16,000 posts on the forum, featuring many, many deep technical resources about Olivetti, all in German. Which turned out to be just an incredible resource for me. I mean, this dude had spent decades kind of compiling this stuff, compiling his own collection, writing about it on this forum and on his blog. And when I needed it, it was right there, which was amazing. So I spoke to Ina St. Ina, and I talked to him a little bit about his love of Olivetti machines and his participation in this classic computing club. He lives in Frankfurt, and turns out he was a technician for Olivetti in the late 80s for a bunch of years. And he really reveres it, He talks about the company in its heyday the way people talk about Apple or Braun, their industrial design, they're kind of ahead of their time, product innovation. And also, he has a lot of other parallels with Dr. Buggy. Just like Dr. Buggy at Kansas Fest, Ina St. Ina is deeply integrated in his own community. He participates he organizes his own vintage computing events across Germany, sharing knowledge back and forth. And like Dr. Buggy, these old machines seem to provide an endless supply of knowledge and novelty for him. So most recently, he told me he's trying to fix the logic board on an Olivetti ET111, which is corroded with battery acid, so he can get it working with an Olivetti ETS 2010 word processor. And he's also setting up a high-speed Olivetti DY800 daisy wheel printer to churn out ASCII art. So I guess the fun never really stops when it comes to retro computing. So before too long, thanks in no small part to Ina St. Ina's help, because without him I wouldn't know about the connection between Underwood and sort of these like co-branded Olivetti models, which were better documented online. I was able to get Mr. Underwood working, um, and in this case, I had to kind of bit bang the keyboard matrix with an Arduino. So, since there wasn't an expansion interface, I kind of had to tap into like the columns and rows of each of these individual keys. I was able to find, thanks to the Internet Archive, some like contemporaneous hacker posts from like magazines or articles from magazines in the 70s and 80s. And I was able to get this project done, this version of my Delhi Assistant, and mail that off to my friend and his very appreciative boss. So that was fun and all. But then it was off to, of course, my next project. So while I was spelunking in my dad's basement, I came across the monitor from his TRS-80 Model 1, circa, 1978, I think? So he used to tell me how much he loved this machine. When he was starting out as a lawyer, late 70s, this was his first computer in his office. And when I was growing up, he would tell me that he went away, for the holidays one winter, and he came back, and there had been a flood coming from the floor upstairs in his office building, directly on top of his Model 1. And he said, he just sort of tilted it on its side, let it drain out, let it dry for a couple of days, and it worked great. And then he told me the same thing happened the next winter somehow, and again, it worked fine after drying it out. So this sold him on the Tandy, even though people love to call it the Trash 80. But he spoke reverently of it. And it wasn't, this wasn't my generation. I grew up with the classic Macs, black and white Macs, like the SE30. So this was, before my time. But I kind of wanted to, again, rescue this little bit of hardware and play with it. But I really didn't know where to start. By the way, of course, I had to, had to feature this photo of this showing up on Mr. Underwood as part of my daily planner, my very important purchase of the TRS-80 Model 1. I did order one on eBay because I didn't want to mess with his until I had figured it out a little bit more. But I appreciate that Mr. Underwood, correctly classified it as an important email. I also appreciated that I was the first one to crack open my Model 1 by accessing the screw under the warranty sticker. So, sorry, Radio Shack, wherever you are. And as I started figuring out my way around the Model 1, I discovered there is an exceptionally vibrant TRS-80 community. Some folks have created these amazing, detailed, perfectly faithful reproductions of the Model 1's logic board. They've meticulously drawn each trace, and they provided Gerbers and bill of materials in case anybody wants to do it themselves. Other folks have pioneered the process of like flashing new ROM, kind of upgrading the built-in ROM on the TRS-80 and creating these adapter boards because the original ROM chips, that layout is like defunct, unavailable these days. Other folks have built new games and productivity apps for the TRS-80 or created these replacements for the unique cockamamie power supply that's like a combo AC-DC transformer that the Model 1 used. It's just an incredibly amazing active community. And one of the most impressive projects that I've seen in the community is known as the TRS-IO. Just this card that basically piggybacks off of the expansion interface in the Model 1 and the Model 3 to offer a ton of customization, including, most relevant for the project that I was working on, network connectivity. So this allowed me to build this project that I called the MTS-80 the MTS-70 as a gift for my dad's 70th birthday last year, the MTS being his initials. And the MTS-70 is this kind of custom mega app. I built it in BASIC just for him. It's just got a bunch of stuff only he would be interested in. It has this Go emulator, which is really fun. So if you want to play a game of Go, as he does during his off hours, you can do that on the MTS-70. It offers tides, currents, and weather data. He spends a lot of time outdoors on the water, so it's always important to check the weather conditions when you're getting out on the water. Now you can do that with your trusty MTS-70. It has, this is maybe one of my favorites, it has this text-based adventure game. This is uses a GPT-4 API to kind of power this into infinity in the background. But basically, just this bespoke role-playing game that's tailored again to our family, to his house where he lives. Again, spends a lot of time on the water. You can walk around the beach and inspect erosion and look for flotsam and monitor other interesting stuff on the waterfront as he likes to do. And then it can also play Happy Birthday. So this project uses the TRS-IO for connectivity. It's kind of at the heart of everything. And getting it going was no small feat. The whole project really involved, first of all, I had to figure out, the TRS-80. I had to figure out how to rebuild the Model 1's motherboard, which wasn't totally working. I had to learn BASIC and how to, load programs from either cassettes, or in my case, from like audio files that got piped into the TRS-80. Then I had to order and assemble the TRS-IO board, which required me to get much better at surface mount soldering, which I had basically never done before. And then I had to, manipulate the interface to figure out how to speak to the various APIs I was connecting to. Basically, I used like this Python-based, server kind of man in the middle that's connecting to the interface card wirelessly on the same local server to kind of power all of these tools in the back end. So this whole project, took a couple of months, but the TRS-IO was really at the heart of it. And just if I hadn't, found this resource and the people who had spent a decade working on it, I would never have been able to do any of this. So I got a chance to speak to the two folks who are responsible for the TRS-IO, built it, and have been, honing it, refining it, and enhancing it for the past decade. So this is Arno and Matt, who are the brains behind the project. Arno started this after rediscovering his TRS-80 in his own parents' basement about a decade ago, and working on things like an Android emulator for the TRS-80 and something called RetroStore, which is basically an app store for TRS-80 programs, and relied on an interface card that basically was the first version of what became TRS-IO. And along the way, he met Matt, who was first just a user of the TRS-IO, but then became a thought partner and kind of an active, contributor. Matt has a background in embedded computing, and he helped push the envelope further by integrating things like an FPGA card that allows for HDMI out, which is really cool. Just unbelievable, the stuff they've done here. And I spoke to Arno and Matt because I, again, wanted to really understand what motivates this enormous amount of work. These folks, like Dr. Buggy, like Ina ST Ina, have just spent so much time and energy, and giving back to the community. They've designed and built the boards. They deal with customer support, via Discord. They manage GitHub repos. Matt very charitably invited me to mail my board to him because I was having these soldering issues. So he had me mail it to him so he could troubleshoot and mail it back. And of course, he sent me some free goodies, just like Dr. Buggy, because apparently everyone sends free goodies in this community. And what Matt told me was interesting. He told me that back in the day, he had disliked the Model 1. It was infamous, when it came out, for having tons of limitations and bugs. When I cracked mine open, you could see just this built-in daughter card or daughter board that added in the factory to correct some ROM issue. No lowercase support, no sound card, tons of radio interference. But he loves the Model 1 now for all the same reasons. He talked about it as a blank slate, as the simplest type of computer one could have, which means for him there's infinite opportunity to kind of build on it and enhance it. And as Arno told me, they keep just discovering these new things, right? You think you know everything about the machine, and then you discover something you don't know, which is pretty amazing after 50 years. So, like Dr. Buggy at Kansas Fest, and my German friend, Ina ST Ina, Arno and Matt are regulars at Tandy Assembly, which is the amazingly named annual TRS-80 meetup in Ohio. They present their progress on the TRS-IO. They're working on something called Pocket TRS, other emulators. They compare notes with the rest of the community. They kind of share ideas back and forth, and after a decade, they're still going strong. And I just think that's an incredible thing to celebrate, and a huge lesson in commitment and community that we can all learn from and bring into our projects. So, I can't be with you in person this week, but I did have a moment earlier this week. I was in Boulder, and I got to pop in for the first time to the Media Archaeology Lab on the campus of CU Boulder in Colorado. God, what an amazing resource. And when I was there, a docent explained to me that the lab there is part of the Media Studies department, not engineering. And he gestured to the rows of hardware, but then up to the huge, huge library of software. And he talked about how a lot of their work is really about maintaining the hardware so that they can keep the software alive. And I thought that was very profound. We stood there and we swapped stories about developments in old tech. He told me about these new Apple II games that a fellow docent there is developing. He taught me something I never knew about a hidden ROM Easter egg in the SE and SE30, which are computers that I thought I knew everything about by now. We talked about saving data and rescuing history from bit rot. And I realized, maybe there's no big difference between being a magpie, like I've always identified myself, just flitting about from project to project. And, some of these people that I've interviewed and spoken to and relied on over the past couple of years who've spent so much time diving deep into a single platform. Because really, I think the same things that drive me are what drive Dr. Buggy, and Ina ST Ina, and Matt and Arno, which is that there's always something new to discover. There's always, room to go deeper, to learn something more, to pioneer something, to hone the edges of something. And perhaps more importantly, there's always someone new to share it with, which is just such an amazing thing, and I think is really the point of why we're all here today. So that's all I had for you. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope to get to see you all in person next year. I'll be hanging out on Discord, but you can look me up. My blog outlining my projects is over here at thingswemake.com. And I've got a couple QR codes for just a few projects, or just a few links here. So Dr. Buggy's eBay store if you need to buy any keycaps or switches from him. Ina ST Ina's blog post where he outlines his enormous collection of Olivetti typewriters and all of the differences between them. And of course a link to the GitHub repo for the TRS-IO, so that you can dust off your own Tandy from your own parents' basement and get that going. So I'll see you on the internet, and I hope you all had a great day.